During the mid-1990s, the University of Benin was abuzz with the name Koraino, the feared and revered leader of the Airlord confraternity. As the occupant of the esteemed position of Ibaka, the highest rank in the Airlord hierarchy, Koraino wielded immense power and influence over the student body. His regime was marked by ruthlessness, as he consistently intimidated students both within and outside the university campus. Koraino's presence was always felt, wherever he went. He had an uncanny ability to command attention, often using his charisma to assert his dominance over others. However, this need for validation often manifested in a desperate desire to use someone as a scapegoat, thereby showcasing his rugged and feared persona. This trait earned him a reputation as a merciless and feared figure who would stop at nothing to maintain his grip on power. One of the most disturbing aspects of Koraino's behavior was his blatant disregard for the feelings and relationships of others. It was said that he would often toast someone's girlfriend, openly flirting with her in the presence of her boyfriend, simply to assert his dominance. If the boyfriend dared to object, Koraino would not hesitate to resort to violence, leaving a trail of fear and intimidation in his wake. Interestingly, Koraino's family had a significant presence on campus, with his mother operating the popular campus Sheraton. This familiar connection only served to further solidify Koraino's reputation as a force to be reckoned with, both within and outside the university community. As a result, Koraino became a household name, synonymous with power, ruthlessness, and fear. His reputation preceded him, striking fear into the hearts of students and faculty alike. Koraino's legend continued to grow, with whispers of his exploits spreading like wildfire throughout the campus. Despite his fearsome reputation, Koraino remained a fascinating figure, with many drawn to his charismatic presence and the aura of power that surrounded him. However, for those who crossed his path, Koraino's wrath was a terrifying prospect, one that could have far-reaching and devastating consequences. Despite Koraino's fearsome reputation for ruthlessness and ruggedity, he had a surprisingly vulnerable side, a soft spot for the ladies. It was well known within the university campus that Koraino had a plethora of girlfriends, each one eager to bask in the attention of the powerful Airlord leader. His charm and charisma were undeniable, and many women found themselves drawn to his confident and assertive nature. However, Koraino's motivations for pursuing women were not entirely pure. He had a peculiar fascination with coveting the girlfriends of others, particularly those who he perceived as weak or vulnerable. This peculiar obsession seemed to stem from a deep-seated need to assert his dominance over others, to prove his superiority by claiming the affections of someone who was already spoken for. Koraino's intimidating nature was a hallmark of his personality, and it was on full display for all to see. His hot temper and short fuse made him prone to explosive outbursts of anger, often at the slightest provocation. This volatility made him unpredictable and feared by many, as he was just as likely to lash out with violence as he was to charm and cajole. The consequences of Koraino's short temper were often devastating, as he would frequently resort to violence even in situations where it was entirely unwarranted. This lack of impulse control made him a liability to those around him, and his fellow Airlord members often found themselves walking on eggshells in an effort to avoid triggering one of Koraino's infamous outbursts. Despite his many flaws, Koraino was a figure of great respect and admiration within the university campus. His fellow Airlord members revered him as a leader, and his reputation as a formidable and ruthless operator was well-deserved. However, not everyone was satisfied with Koraino's leadership, and there were whispers among some of his fellow Airlords that he was not the right man for the job. These dissenting voices felt that Koraino's impulsiveness and lack of self-control made him a liability, and that his obsession with women and violence was ultimately detrimental to the Airlords as a whole. They longed for a more measured and thoughtful leader, one who could provide stability and direction to the organization. But for now, Koraino remained firmly in charge, his reputation and influence continuing to grow with each passing day. Koraino, the notorious leader of the Airlord confraternity, had a favorite haunt where he would often gather with his fellow Airlords to socialize and indulge in their favorite beverages. This popular beer joint, known as Unity Kitchen, was a hotspot for students and locals alike, and Koraino would frequently visit the establishment, always on the lookout for potential prey. It was not uncommon for Koraino to target individuals who he perceived as being weak or vulnerable, and he would often do so with impunity, using his intimidating presence and reputation to cow his victims into submission. Even within the confines of the Unity kitchen, Koraino's predatory nature was always on full display, as he would scan the room for potential targets, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of curiosity and menace. On this particular occasion, Koraino's attention was drawn to a young Jambite, who had recently arrived in the area and was unfamiliar with the local dynamics. The Jambite, oblivious to Koraino's identity as the leader of the Airlord confraternity, had unwittingly crossed his path, failing to greet him as he passed through the Unity kitchen. This oversight was a grave mistake, as Koraino was not accustomed to being ignored or disrespected, and he took great umbrage at the Jambite's failure to acknowledge him. Koraino's anger was palpable as he called out to the Jambite, his voice dripping with menace. "Who are you?" he demanded, his eyes blazing with indignation. "And why did you pass me without greeting me?" The Jambite, sensing that he had inadvertently offended someone, attempted to explain himself, but Koraino was in no mood to listen. Before the Jambite could even begin to apologize, Koraino had already unleashed a flurry of slaps, his short temper getting the better of him. The Jambite, caught off guard by the sudden outburst of violence, stumbled backward, his face stinging from the blows. It was only later, after the dust had settled, that the Jambite discovered the true identity of his assailant, and the reason why he should have been more circumspect in his behavior. As the Jambite nursed his wounded pride and tender face, he couldn't help but wonder how he had so unwittingly crossed paths with the infamous Koraino. He had heard rumors, of course, about the Airlord confraternity and its ruthless leader, but he had never imagined that he would become a target of Koraino's wrath. The experience had left him shaken, but also wiser, and he vowed to be more mindful of his surroundings in the future, lest he cross paths with Koraino again. The incident that ultimately led to Koraino's demise was a tale of greed, self-centeredness, and the unbridled pursuit of power. Koraino, the notorious leader of the Airlord confraternity, had always been driven by a desire to further his own interests, often at the expense of those around him. His decision to hand over the reins of power to his younger brother, effectively making him the new Ibaka of the Airlords, was a classic example of this self-serving mentality. The position of Ibaka was the most revered and powerful role within the Airlord hierarchy, as it bestowed upon the holder the authority to lead the group and make crucial decisions that would impact the entire confraternity. Koraino's decision to appoint his brother to this position was seen as a blatant attempt to consolidate power within his family, and it did not sit well with many of his fellow Airlords. The opposition to Koraino's plan was fierce, with many Airlords vehemently disagreeing with his decision. The tension simmering beneath the surface eventually boiled over into a series of heated altercations and violent clashes between Koraino and his opponents. The situation became increasingly volatile, with Koraino's adversaries beginning to conspire against him. As the threat to his leadership grew, Koraino's opponents started to plot his downfall. They realized that the key to defeating Koraino lay in exploiting his weakness for women, and they set their sights on using one of his girlfriends to lure him into a trap. The girl, whose identity remains unknown, agreed to cooperate with Koraino's adversaries, although the exact nature of the deal she struck with them remains shrouded in mystery. It is unclear whether Koraino's opponents offered her financial inducements or other benefits in exchange for her cooperation, but it is evident that she played a pivotal role in his eventual demise. According to the most reliable accounts, the girl arranged to meet Koraino at a secluded location, where he was ambushed and brutally assassinated by his fellow Airlords. The shocking murder of Koraino sent shockwaves throughout the University of Benin campus, leaving students and faculty members stunned and bewildered. The aftermath of his killing remains unclear, but it is likely that the consequences were devastating. The brutal and senseless murder of Koraino serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of cultism and the devastating impact it can have on individuals and communities. Cultism is a scourge that has stolen, killed, and destroyed countless lives, leaving behind a trail of devastation and heartbreak. It is a plague that must be eradicated, and it is up to each and every one of us to say no to cultism and to promote a culture of peace, tolerance, and understanding. The memory of Koraino and the countless others who have fallen victim to the scourge of cultism must serve as a catalyst for change, inspiring us to work towards a brighter, safer, and more harmonious future for all.